Ever get that feeling, like, what if this is all in our heads? It's a wild thought, but that's what we're diving into today, right? This whole idea of solipsism.
And the really cool thing is this deep dive all started with you, with your questions. Like you were wrestling with this concept of, well, is everything just my mind playing tricks?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are other people even real, or are they just like projections in my own mind?
It's a question philosophers have grappled with for ages.
Yeah.
This idea of solipsism, that the only thing you can really be sure of is your own existence, your own mind.
Right, because how could you ever prove that anything outside of your own thoughts exists?
Exactly. It's like
Right.
any evidence you could gather would still have to be filtered through your own senses, your own
Yeah.
mind, right?
Okay, that makes my head spin a little bit. But then there's this other part I found so interesting about how even if it's all a projection, can't we still enjoy it? Like, does it really matter if it's real in some ultimate sense, if it feels real to us?
I love how you put that. You're hitting on something really profound there, this idea of what we call phenomenological focus. Basically, it means placing importance on your own unique subjective experience.
Hmm.
So like whether the world outside matches our perception perfectly becomes kind of secondary to how we experience it.
So instead of getting hung up on whether something is objectively real, we focus on how it feels, how we experience it.
Exactly. And that ties into this idea of pragmatic enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's a projection, the joy you find in it, that's as real as it gets.
It's like if you're having fun, does it really matter if it's all in your head?
Right. And it made me think about when you were talking about mention a specific detail or example from the listener's dialogue that illustrates their enjoyment of life that's pragmatic enjoyment in action, wouldn't you say?
Totally. But then you went on to ask this question that totally threw me for a loop. You're like, hold on, could our DNA be the program for all of this? Like, is our DNA the code for this whole simulation we're calling life?
You're making some really interesting connections here. It's like you're drawing a line between solipsism and like hardcore biology and even computer science.
Because if our DNA is the code, that means our lives are basically just video games.
It's a mind-blowing concept to consider, right? And just like a video game, even if there's a pre-programmed element, our choices, our actions, those all shape how the program develops over time, right?
So even in a simulation, we still have free will. We still have the power to influence how things play out. That actually makes me think about something else you said about how you're kind of drawn to this whole idea. You even said something like, my instinct tells me this might be true, and I love it. It makes me feel good about life. It's like you're saying, okay, so maybe this whole crazy idea is true, but I'm cool with it. What is it about this whole concept that really speaks to you?
Well, it kind of feels like, even if it's all a simulation, maybe it's a simulation that's like on our side.
It's like the universe has your back, even if that universe is all in your head.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, because that actually lines up with a lot of different philosophies and stuff that people have been thinking about forever. Like, think about Stoicism, right? It's all about finding peace in the stuff you can control. Or even Buddhism with that whole mindfulness thing.
So you're saying even though solipsism seems kind of out there, it actually shares some DNA with these other ways of thinking that have been around for centuries.
Totally. And that's what I find so refreshing about your take on it, honestly. You're not getting lost in the weeds of trying to prove it or disprove it. You're more like, okay, even if it's just a theory, could it actually make my life better?
And that takes us to another part of this whole thing that I found really fascinating. You were thinking about how this idea, this whole solipsistic worldview, how it might change the way you treat other people.
Yeah, it's a deep question, right? Like, if you really stopped and thought about it, what if everyone you meet is actually like a reflection of your own consciousness? Would you act differently?
Because if everyone's a part of your own mind, in a way, hurting them would be like hurting yourself.
Exactly. Maybe it could lead to more empathy, more compassion.
It kind of adds a whole other layer to that whole golden rule thing, doesn't it?
For sure. It even makes you wonder about your own personal ethics. Like, if the world is a projection of your mind, do your actions still matter?
It's like, even if you're in a dream, you still want to be a good person in that dream, right?
But isn't that kind of a paradox, though? On the one hand, you're saying maybe my mind is creating everything, but then on the other hand, you're saying, well, I choose to believe that this reality I'm creating is inherently good.
It is interesting when you put it like that. But maybe that's what makes this whole thing so powerful. It's humbling, but it's also empowering at the same time, wouldn't you say?
Like you have this immense power to create your reality, but you also choose to believe that it's a good creation, not something scary or whatever. And maybe that kind of mindset can change your whole perspective, Like
Yeah.
when you look at a painting, you don't always need to understand every single detail to appreciate how amazing it is.
You're not getting bogged down in the technical stuff. You're just letting yourself experience it.
Right. And maybe that's how we can approach this idea of solipsism too.
Mhm.
It's okay to embrace the mystery.
Instead of getting freaked out by what you don't know, you can actually find joy in it. Which kind of brings us to that last question you asked that really got me thinking. You said something like, how would this change how I actually live my life, my goals, my relationships, all of it?
I mean, that's what it all comes down to, isn't it? How do we take these big ideas and actually make them mean something in our day-to-day lives?
So how would you do that? How could you take this whole solipsism thing and apply it in a way that actually makes your life better? More fun, even. It's like you're saying, okay, so let's play pretend for a minute.
If I really believed my mind was shaping my reality, what would I do differently? How would I act? It's a fun way to think about it, right? Like, what if setting a goal wasn't just about the end result, but about the whole journey your mind is creating along the way?
So even the setbacks, the obstacles, those become part of the story, right?
Exactly. Like plot twists in a movie, they're there to keep things interesting, help you grow, all that.
So instead of getting bummed out when things get tough, you could almost look at it like, okay, what's the lesson here? What's this experience trying to teach me?
Right. And think about relationships that way too.
Yeah.
What if every person you meet is like a character your mind has created to teach you something, show you a new perspective?
Ooh, that's deep. So, like, even arguments and disagreements, those become opportunities to learn something about yourself.
You got it. It's all about finding the value in every experience, even the tough ones.
I gotta say, it's pretty amazing how you've taken this whole solipsism thing, which could be kind of a scary thought for some people, and turned it into something positive.
Well, I think it's all about how you choose to look at it, right? Instead of getting lost in all the unknowns, why not focus on the good stuff?
Exactly. Embrace the mystery, find the joy, all that. And you know what? Even if none of the solipsism stuff is real in some big cosmic sense, I think there's still a lot we can take away from it.
100%.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's all about being curious, finding the wonder in everyday life, and realizing that sometimes the journey is more important than the destination.
So to our listener out there, thank you for taking us on this awesome deep dive with you. It's been a wild ride. And to everyone else, we'll catch you next time for another exploration into, well, who knows what. Until then, keep those minds open and stay curious.